wake up, you're going to wake up.
Hello, this is Namii Mercurii of Mercurii Media, and today we will be talking about who exactly is Namii Mercurii and what has she come here to do. I believe ultimately that this new digital age requires the construction of brands that are much bigger than ourselves and much bigger than the usual playing field of personas, almost larger than life and exceptionally caricaturized in a way that evokes the mythological dimensions of that which we used to abide by and live our lives by. It's about becoming this character ultimately in order to facilitate a deeper vision, one which has always been calling out to us and beckoning us forward. And I have had the initial vision and dream, as inchoate as it was, within myself for a very, very long time. But it wasn't until very recently that I discovered the persona that was going to facilitate that dream. And this is Namii Mercurii. Ultimately, she is a part of me. She's just a very blown out part of me and drawn to extremes. Her vision, my vision, is to create a world where art, communication, transformation, and alchemy of self, environment, and mind are ultimately entwined. And this is a process that it has no strict structure in terms of how it will play out. I am more letting the core principles guide me into the formation of it as a whole and allowing it to generate its own momentum as long as I'm attentive to both the persona and the organization of Mercurii Media. It's a very complex sort of process. I mean, all massive things are. They're always going to defy our conception. They're going to transcend the systems that we believe to be necessary. They're going to draw us into this hyperloop of expansion far beyond that which we could have ever imagined. And that's both the beauty and the horror of it. I mean, most beautiful things are quite horrific in terms of just how deeply they transform us, brutally, maddeningly, wildly, rawly, strikingly. It's all electric, ultimately. I aspire for an electricity of content that is transportive, elevating, and hyper saturated with the universal rhythms of humanity. I want something that connects us all in a very direct way, very direct and accessible, transcends language, it transcends cultural barriers, it transcends paradigms. Art at its core is always going to be this algorithm that we all can relate to because it taps into that little undercurrent of our very substrata. And in bringing this forward, I strive to bring it forward as an agent of change and transformation in a very shamanic way, You see, the hidden dimensions of art are very, very unexplored in this age and in this time and in this era where scientific reason prevails. We refuse to explore the dark domains of which correspond with more lunar conception and reason with air quotation, of course, because it's not traditional reason, but it's still bound with a structural system which grants its validity and allows it to be comprehended if you really sit down and explore and define it in this new sort of perception, or these forms of perception and the disciplines that will spawn from them are a part of what we are ultimately shifting into in this era and in this massive wave of change. It's not going to be as we imagine it will be. It's going to be much different, and it will be led forward by those waves of darkened knowledge. And dark here does not imply any sort of moral character or imposition of ideals or whatever. It's not bound to good or bad or any shade in between. It's simply dark as in unexplored. Unexplored modalities of mind and consciousness that are here too largely considered fringe. And no, I don't consider this to be New Age because most of the New Age movements correspond to a very singular plane of mind, which corresponds to the prevailing paradigm just as much as anything else. I mean, it's an outgrowth. It's intricately entwined with the overarching paradigm force field of reason. It's ultimately the shadowed reason, where it's pushing away reason and deciding to live in a world of fantasy, illusion, and belief in whatever idea of creating reality as some sort of internal game. But it's much more complex, and the thing is, we can merge the complexity of sort of with the foundation we have built through the scientific movement as moving into technological advancements and the development and proliferation of minds and the synergy and the collaborations and all these popping fields, and we can move from that foundation into this dark matter and create a very sound structure which incorporates what we have developed of our reason and our capacities for structured thought and analytical deconstruction and construction, and we can create a very valid system that will allow us to advance in new directions for humanity as a whole. These directions correspond more to the places we never thought we would travel. Notice now in the common sort of prediction for the future from this age point, or from this point forward, is ultimately seen from a place of technological advancement and curing the problems of humanity through innovation of technology, of digital reality, and of the disciplines of STEM mostly. But you must understand that it's so simplistic to only see a future and upon one plane of momentum. From the points that we are now, that's silly, honestly. The thing about nature and how nature evolves is it's always evolving in a sort of chaotic, circular sort of flux of many variables which are incapable of being determined through logic alone. It's more a process of, I don't want to say intuition because it's much more refined, but we are essentially a part of a very complex environment, and we're in constant communication with that environment, regardless of if we're aware of it or not. And when it comes to understanding what will come of the future, we need only tune into our environment, tune into our body, our presence, our being, and not in a very ungrounded way, like a mystical sort of, this is healing. No, it's in a way where we are actually just becoming aware of what is around us and feeling into the currents. And it sounds so silly because we haven't developed a foundation of thought that can support something such as this in terms of its revelatory advantage. But back to the point, when we need to become aware of something that's coming, we're not going to become aware by reasoning our way through it, looking at culture, because culture is ultimately a product of the greater ecosystem and the greater environment. Therefore, it is subject to the influence of factors that transcend it. And I see the world ultimately as a web, which is connected to a universal system of which we are entwined. I mean, the ecosystem is not limited to the earth. We are part of a universal ecosystem as well, and we are influenced by various factors of which we are very unaware of. I mean, they direct us and influence us, and we may reason our way to some sort of sense of what is happening, but the reason I find as isolated from every other sense is usually is falling short in one way or another. And so it's almost very, very naive to believe that our future lies in the hands of tech and artificial intelligence and all of these great, great advancements born from the subsequent developments as have occurred lately. And it's very frustrating because when people feel, or when the guiding cultural tone is communicated that ultimately tech is where advancement lies, or this is where, or that is where, we are all sort of intellectually predisposed towards drawing or crafting our futures out of that guide point. But in reality, the future is much more complex, much more advanced outside of the realm of tech. It has technological advancements, but it also has human advancement. It also has ecological advancement. It also has intellectual advancements that deal with entirely new disciplines that we haven't even conceptualized. And in order for us as a whole to reach into that grand future, we have to sort of decentralize from the overarching cultural tone of technological domination, and we have to start giving people space and freedom to explore themselves and to explore their passions and to explore what they are guided to, because this is what will push us forward into the future. It's ultimately empowerment of the individual, because empowerment of the individual in a free market society grants us momentum towards creative flourishing. And in general, people like to criticize capitalism as this sort of empty and lifeless and soul-sucking force, but there are two expressions of capitalism. As with everything, there is a duality. There is the creative capitalism, which is what we're moving towards, and there's predatorial capitalism. Predatorial capitalism is always hell-bent on gain without considering the greater effect. It's always very, very immature, sort of pushing forward in ignorance, regardless of the forces and the factors that push back and tell us that we're actually messing with the planet, or we're messing with our fellow human beings, or we're exploiting or drawing them into a place where there will be no return. And what you see right now in this age is everybody's waking up to this. Everybody's waking up to the fact that the overarching theme of the markets has been for a very long time predatorial, dominating, conquest based, and sort of hell-bent on amassing the most resources just for the sake of feeling powerful. And that power is a false power, because it's not rooted in any sort of authentic belonging to the greater ecosystem. So as we move away from that predatorial relationship to the Earth's resources, you start to see people waking up to the fact that there's a different way, and this different way revolves around discovering ourselves as individuals, empowering ourselves as individuals, healing and understanding the internal complexes that we possess that keep us from living the life that we are called to, working through those in service to the earth and to our people, because we understand that innately we hold gifts that we are capable of delivering, but if we never clear the path for our gifts to manifest, then the world will be without our gifts, and we are ultimately doing everyone a disservice and keeping the world at a much more primitive expression than it needs to be. And all it takes is discovering that force within you, and then allowing it to guide you through the process of release, of clearing away all that blinds that, or all that blocks that expression from manifesting into the currents of the world. Because we are, as a global community, we are one giant organism. We are not as separate as we make ourselves out to be. And this is not some sort of ungrounded hippie way of saying that we are all one. No, we're actually connected in the sense that we are a massive ecosystem. We have this constant stream, this constant flow between each of our individual beings, because of the way we are designed, because of the way the environment is designed, because of how things flow and how forces and structures work and systems as a whole. They're always interconnected, and this is no different for society, for culture, for human consciousness. It's all layer after layer of interconnected webs. And the basic premise is this: moving forward into the future, the best work that we can possibly do is to draw out our individual power, so that others may draw that same power out, and we can move forward as a species that is ultimately evolving towards a greater future. And this isn't about any one singular cause. There will be no one Messiah. Everybody has something to give. Everybody has something beautiful, something brilliant, something striking to deliver. And the more we can embrace that personal process, the more we can celebrate it, the more we can develop resources and guides who will walk us through it, the more we can journey into a much brighter land where we don't need to fear, where we can be creative and sculpting the life that we wish to build for ourselves and for the greater community, finding our belonging within this web, within this brilliant, utterly complex, magnificently sublime web of life. And it's just, we're out there. It'll just take a lot of work, but I think we have a very bright future, and I think instead of feeling so damned by the darkness of the times, we let that darkness teach us and we rise. It's very, very simple. And this is Namii Mercury closing off for Mercury Media, purveyor of mass exchange and transformation.